Right, workshop video log. Now today we got the Tiger Cub back outside, but it is now finished. We have the Matchless G11, that's now finished. Last time we was looking at the Tiger Cub, I explained to you we had a bit of a job trying to start it. Compression was too high and it was a bit smoky. But as she runs up, she's just a little bit smoky. So it's been getting better, but... And I mentioned about maybe we might take the head off, which meant taking the engine out and reducing some of the surface area on the piston. Not really a good idea. Also with this barrel, which I picked up second hand, there was some nasty score marks. But they actually weren't score marks, they're more where the boring bar in the past have been used to rebore. In the way a reboring machine works, it will pass through the bore, but when it goes to the bottom or to the top, you want to release the cutter. It would put two grooves, so it had been moved and it had got two lines, and they're quite deep. Because we had problems with that compression, I managed to put a standard compression piston in, plus 60, second hand, and had this rebored to 60 thou. That was originally on 20, I think it was. So it's been bored right out, it got rid of all those score marks, and now it's made it a pleasant bike. It starts easily, it doesn't smoke, and the clutch doesn't slip. So we're just going to start the bike up now. Oh, and there's some pictures and some footage of the rebore being done as well. So we're just going to start up. Put the fuel on. We'll tickle the carb. We won't need to give it any choke. We'll just get this to splash out a little bit. Okay. These are a very small bike. I mean, they're tiny. Right, so ignition's on. Give it a kick. Straight away, ticks over. What this needs now to finish the bike off, and I'm going to get the customer to pop in. Oh, just restart that. To finish it off, it needs a set of footrest rubbers, it needs a registration number, and really just a few bits and pieces. And I've said to him, pop in, then you can see where we are with your bike. But they're a small bike, but they do sound good. So that's all ready to go now. So yeah, I'm quite pleased. I'm pleased I've got it finished because it has been here a long time. Just a little bit more running in, bedding in, but that's a cold engine. It ticks over pretty well, really. So it's a lot better than it was before. Just turn the fuel off. Now the Matchless G11. Similar work to the, we had a G12 in here before, 650. Remember this engine, we had it all stripped down and it did need another crankshaft, a replacement crank. You can't get new crankshafts, so it was one that was reconditioned. It came through the owners club and luckily had all the machining done, so it's had the journals ground, the centre bearings been done, and we put big end shells in it. And I'd already done the top end. The top end had been done before, and this was a job that he had done. It'd been rebored and it's still smoky. What we found when we took this apart, we found that the crank was completely solid. So we have a thing called a sludge trap. We removed both screws and it's completely solid. So no oil could actually get through the crankshaft to lubricate the big end shells. And that's why all that white metal had been taken off. It's completely blocked, and we found that collapse bearing on the timing side. Why that's collapsed, don't know. It shouldn't do that. And there's a few washers missing, a spacer washer, there was a back washer missing. So all the components that weren't in there have now been put in there, the correct parts. So we'll fire this one up It needs a bit of running in. I've done about 20 miles on it. It's pretty good. High seat, very comfy bike, heavy engine. So we turn the fuel on, just tickle it. It shouldn't need any choke. Now, just show you one thing here. These are renowned for wet sumping Matchless engines. They have a feed pump and a return oil pump. Now, they do have a real tendency of wet sumping. So what people tend to do is they put a lever in here, a tap, which I'm not over keen on, but you do need it because they will wet sump. But this one's got a micro switch built into it. So when it's turned off in that position, switch plunger comes down. This will trip out the magneto. So it's normal magneto here. So you won't get a spark until that plunger goes back up. So in theory you can stop the bike on that, the engine on that, by flicking it. But he has another switch here. So by pressing it I can just trip the mag out. It just kills the magneto. So that's in the down position, so that's a feed position, and we can check the return in the oil tank in a moment. So we're ready to go. We've got advance and retard, and slack wire is fully advanced. We'll bring this back a little bit. Won't give it any choke. Get compression, give it a good kick. So normally it would go first time, but I think because I got it ready to go and didn't start it. Tick over is always a bit slow when they're cold, so we'll speed it up a little bit. These are a real sort of go-to-work bike. In the day, they would have been sort of the bike that before people could afford to have a car, Dad would go off on the motorbike to work, either solo or a sidecar. Very reliable, very comfortable seat. Yeah, they don't always make high amount of money, these bikes. They're slightly more affordable than your Triumphs or your Nortons or BSAs. Very different inside. We've got that third bearing, and it does make the engine run very smooth. You can hear a bit of gear noise on this because it's all gear driven. You've got pinion gear, mag gear, dynamo gear and intermediate gear. But it's on a Siamese pipe and it's quite quiet. We can just drop the tick over down a bit now. You can look at the return now on the oil tank. If the camera can get in there, you can see that we always check in there, and in the corner there you'll probably see the oil coming back. So we're going to take this out for a road test in a moment, and yeah, and it should go back to Scotland with the Dominator, hopefully in the next week or so, and the customer can have his bike back, or bikes back. So we just stop it on the button here. I'll just show you on this switch so you can't make a mistake. No, I'm going to just kick it over again. Okay. Now if that is switched off, now if I kick it now, that won't start. So you've got to remember to turn that back on where it's safe, because if you haven't got the micro switch, you could easily, and it's one of those things that will happen sometime, you'll forget to turn that back on. So I'm always a bit worried about taps, but a tap with a micro switch is fine. Or, I know I have mentioned before, you can get the valve and the inline assembly that goes into your feed pipe. Some of those are good. If you do have a problem with wet sumping and you really can't get over it, and it gets to the point where You leave it a week and a half, 2 weeks, and it's wet sumping. I can shine them up, they are good. And I have put one back on Bob's bike, on the Dominator, because I can't see him riding it as much as he probably would like to, because of his commitments at home. So if it's left for 2 or 3 weeks, he hasn't got to mess about trying to drain the oil down. Although it's got a new pump in, it was still wet sump. Dominators, well, Norton engines, they do wet sump, and so do these. So anything that you can put in there, sometimes it goes against what I say sometimes about valves, but it does work okay. So yes, done, pleased with this one. We'll put that back on, because we're going to take it for a ride very soon. And leave this back on the side stand for the moment. Fuel off. So quite happy with those 2 bikes now. Now back up here, you've got to go back in the workshop, and you can see we've got a new bike on the scene. This is our new camera bike. So all our motion shots when we're out on the bikes, our cameraman, he's going to be riding this. So Alex has got a new machine, really nice, the 10A, ideal bike for camera work. It's got panniers, so we can put plenty of camera gear in here. He's got so many facilities on here that obviously taking it anywhere when we need to go off-road. And yeah, good setup. So, okay, we're going to talk about the Scott project. Back on with this. Just before we do this, going to mention at the weekend, we went down to the revival at Goodwood. And great day. I rode down the bike and met up with Alex and his partner. And it was really good to see all the bikes in the holding area before they went out on the circuit. Plenty of chance to look at the bikes up and close, the riders, because that event is normally done with a second rider, so it's a changeover. So to talk to the riders and obviously some of the guys that were preparing the bikes, some interesting machinery. We saw some early BMWs. People don't realise how quick they were. The compressor BMW was extremely quick. And you're looking at a date about 1929. A lot of these bikes are heavily worked on now, but what a lovely place to go. The atmosphere, seeing the cars, seeing the bikes in the aircraft, I fully recommend, if you haven't been, go along. But for seeing bikes of the 50s, it was brilliant. The last time you saw this, we had the front mudguard back in, and I mentioned that we was waiting for the wheels to come back. The customer to clean the wheels up. He put the tyres on, I put the spindles back in, adjusted the bearings, greased up the bearings. So we have the front wheel back in. Back end, we got the mudguard on, we got the light on. Nothing's been wired up yet. And the pillion pad. Now, yes, this is the wrong way around. The customer put it back on the mudguard. He's recovered it himself, but it is the wrong way round. So I'm just going to have to lift up the mudguard off the stays and just change the pad round. This has not been fully restored. It's just had a sympathetic to makeover. We want to retain the patina, so it's not been overdone. Back wheel's back in, as you can see, and everything's connected up. We do need to have a return spring for the brake pedal, because it's only got the shoe springs at the moment, and when you put the brake on, it does hang up a little bit. So we're going to put a return spring here on this linkage, so make sure, because it's going to have the sidecar on, it's going up to Scotland, and we don't want the brake holding on. heating up the linings. We spoke about the gearbox before, the engine's back in, the carburetor's got to be rejetted, we go up a size on that now. But yeah, it's all coming together. We're waiting now for the oil pump. The oil pump, hopefully we have some pictures of that being reassembled. It went off to a specialist and the casing was cracked inside, so another good reason to send it away. We want to make sure that that pump is delivering oil, and you know, this is constant loss, it's got to work properly, that, and also has a regulator valve to give oil drip feed to the primary chain and also to the mag chain. The other thing we're waiting for is still the magneto, because that was sent away to be fully reconditioned. Although it sparked, we want to make sure that this is 100%. We don't want a situation that we had before where mag breaking down, because that wouldn't be good, would it? So yeah, I'm quite pleased with the way it's come together. Once the Solo's built up and we've got it set up properly and it's run, and then we'll put the sidecar back on. Oh, one thing I did forget to mention, we've had these made. Now, you probably saw the original tool bags. They were made of leather. Now, these are a complete copy of the originals. Now, when we looked at the original, we found there was remains of bones and things inside. So something had been living in there and taking its prey back home. So these are quite nice. So these are exactly the same as what we showed you before, but all totally redone now. And I think these will get a nice patina. Just want oiling a little bit, but yeah, it gives it a nice finish. Okay, this is a quick job in the workshop, but one I think that will interest a lot of people. What this is, it's a Tiger 650 1972 unit construction. Now it's in here because problem with ethanol fuel. What it's done, it's rusted the tank on the inside, and so many people mention this already. Ethanol and fuel is not good, and that 10%, it does attract moisture. So if you leave your tank full of petrol, don't really do that, because I'll show you in a moment what's happened. So the customer's taken his tank off, he's tried to clean his carb out, he's tried to get rid of the rust in the tank, and he's put additional filters in to the fuel lines. And we'll talk about that in a moment on the bench, but it appeared here the other day with a box of bits, and he'd already taken the carb off in bits and pieces, so that needs cleaning first, and we need to build it up from there. Okay, so the tank has been removed by the customer. Now, I'm going to take the cap off and show you straight away. This rust is caused by ethanol fuel, and if you look around here, it's really, really bad. It's almost like someone's put salt in there. The corrosion is very, very, this happens very quickly. It's very rapid, the amount of destruction that ethanol fuel will give to a tank. Now, inside, he's tried to clean it up, but the whole tank is very rusty. There are various products you can use. I mean, this I think has been cleaned up superficially with probably putting washers or bolts in there and shaking it. There's various things you can buy, but there's an acid that you can get. People can do it electrolysis process, but we've got some acid in here, and we will have to fill this and try and get all this out. Then we'll etch it, then we'll put a sealer in here. But this is what happens with the modern fuels, so you've got to be careful. Put a fuel stabiliser in there if it's going to be left with fuel for any length of time, because I can see a lot of people needing new tanks. And although you can get a new tank, a lot of them are made in India, you don't want to go down that road really if you can prevent it. Now, this tank should have a pair of taps, a pair of filters built into the actual tap itself. But because I would imagine there's been a problem with corrosion, this has only got a pickup pipe. There should be a fibre filter on the outside of this, so you can see where it was connected. So there's no filtering to that tap anymore. Hence why it's had a couple of inline filters installed. And as people know with the monoblock and concentric carb, there is a micro filter that goes underneath the banjo. In this case, it goes underneath here. and when that's on the bottom of the float bowl, if I just show you, it sits, get it back out like that. So the last point of entry to the carburetor, it will be filtered, it will keep some of the debris out. Putting these additional filters in is okay, but you have shorter fuel lines. Instead of having one fuel line, you've got two, and you've got 4 ends instead of 2 ends. I'd be inclined to put a pair of new taps in the tank to do away with these filters, really, because you've got this secondary one here. You don't really need these, and you just have a nice fuel line. But so we just need to put this through the sonic cleaner, clean this carb up, and make sure this tank has been sealed with a sealer, and it should be okay. But yeah, it's quite frightening when you see the amount of rusting you get. This is probably about the 3rd tank I've had in the workshop in a short space of time. The rusting on this cap is almost a stage where another year or so that will collapse at, and all around this neck here is extremely bad. So yeah, be careful about leaving fuel in your tank, especially the E10. Try and stick E5 in, and if you go for the super unleaded, it hasn't got any ethanol in at all, certain types of fuel. So yeah, one to remember. Okay, we're going to do this bit first today. We normally do it at the end of a ride, but basically we've been out on the bike and it's had a bit of a shakedown. Now this is something that we do for filming, but we also make sure, well I do, that I do it with a customer's bike before it goes back. You need to run a bike in. It's okay with starting the bike up in the workshop and running it up and doing a hot start after you've done the cold start and checking it after a few days. That's fine, but the only way you're going to really know what that bike's like is to take it out and ride it. So you do short runs first, then very easy with the engine. This has had bottom end work done really. It's had the crank ground, a different crank obviously is in here now. So we're making sure that the engine's nice and warm, we're not loading it up. That's another thing, never load an engine up too much. You know, don't hold onto the gears and make it slog. Let it spin, but not rev it too much. This has performed very well today, and it's completely all tight. There's only one slight adjustment I've got to make, and that's on the clutch cable. We don't have an adjuster knurl on the top where the lever is. There's only adjustment on the gearbox. And this is quite extended out already, but the plates are all good. Sometimes people notice that when you start a bike after it's been standing, after it's been ridden, it's still a hot start, you get a puff of smoke. That's quite normal with an old bike. Let's face it, they're old. It could be a little bit of oil has got down past the guides, it's on top of the piston, so when you fire the engine up, it just burns that bit of oil off with the fuel. Hence, that's why it smokes. But this has been very good. It's very similar to the G12 we've done, but this is G11. They call it a super clubman. It's got a Siamese pipe. It's quite quiet, but it has got a nice tone to it. This is only a 600 against the 650, the G12. But as a bike, they are very comfortable. The seat is incredibly comfortable. The forks, these like Norton forks, you know, they're really nice and they don't bottom out. And, you know, even like with a bike of this age, that ride is so incredibly, you know, comfortable. It doesn't shake you about. It was always regarded a little bit as an old man's bike. I think a little bit unfair in a way, but I think AMC really done well with this because we spoke about the engine and what we had to do with the crankshaft, but we got split barrels. What I mean, individual barrels and individual heads. So when you build these engines up, it's very easy. You've got a centre bearing, and we've shown that on the plate, how it all goes together. But when you build up the head, when you put your push rods down into your barrels, everything lines up. It comes straight up into your rockers. You don't have to use a comb to locate the push rods. They just go straight in. And as I explained before, we have an eccentric adjustment, which is really good. Just slacken off a nut and you can turn the spindle, which is on eccentric, to get your valve clearance. It's as simple as that. Yeah, it performs very well. The gearbox is AMC gearbox, what you get in Norton's. It's a little bit tired. but it's okay. You know, the gears are there and it's fine. It pulls extremely well. It's extremely smooth. Single carburetor. We haven't got any leaks. Have a good look round it, and yeah, I think the customer would be happy with this. He certainly will be happy to have it back because it has been here a long time, and it has been a bit of a problem getting the parts. And we mentioned before about Matchless parts aren't particularly easy to find. So through the club, if you got a Matchless or AJS, join the club and get your spares through them. They will help you out. So yeah. Nothing really to say about it really. Yeah, the brakes were good. They seem to be fine. Everything's charging okay. I know we got an electronic components on here. It has been modified slightly. We still have the magneto, but the charging system is not the old type box. It's a modern unit been put on there. But all in all, very good. And a lovely place to ride it too. We've had a chance to ride on quiet roads today. We've not had the traffic, and it's been a joy to take it out.